hills of eastern Oregon, hidden beneath years of official silence, lies a terrifying truth. Between 1852 and 1888, over 800 pioneers vanished along a 20-mile stretch of the Oregon Trail, not due to disease or accidents, but a far darker cause. The Sacred Heart Chapel, a modest building offering comfort to travelers, was actually the center of a mass murder scheme orchestrated by the Grayson family. This family didn't just kill for money. They turned it into a systematic art keeping records of every life they ended and every family they destroyed. What began as isolated disappearances evolved into a ruthless operation that redefined evil. Before we delve into the darkness of the Grayson family's history, I ask you to consider subscribing to this channel. Only the brave are ready to uncover America's most disturbing hidden truths. If you're one of them, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. Your support helps bring these untold stories to light. Now let's go back to 1852, when the Oregon Trail, once a symbol of hope, became a path to horror. Help me with a like and a subscribe to motivate me to make better videos, and don't forget to comment which country you are from. The Oregon Trail, stretching 2,000 miles across the wilderness, promised new beginnings but delivered hardship and death. By 1852, with over 50,000 people on their way west, many had already endured months of grueling travel, facing disease, starvation, and disasters. In this fragile state, travelers were vulnerable to a more sinister threat. In 1851, Father Grayson established the Sacred Heart Chapel, perched on a hill overlooking a natural rest stop along the trail. For pioneers, it seemed like a beacon of hope, offering rest and spiritual comfort with the possibility of a proper burial for loved ones. Father Morrison, a tall, imposing figure in his 40s, presented himself as a missionary. His wife, Sister Constance, was known for her gentle demeanor and medical knowledge, while his younger brother Ezekiel was practical and skilled with livestock and repairs. Together they created an image of Christian charity that attracted desperate travelers seeking refuge. The chapel, built from local timber, was a modest structure with a small cemetery nearby. But it was the basement, unusually large for a building of its size, that held dark secrets. The Graysons used this isolation to their advantage. As families made their way west, exhausted and sick, they came to the chapel seeking help. The Graysons knew their vulnerabilities and positioned themselves as saviors, offering not just spiritual aid but medical care and supplies. Their flexibility with different Protestant denominations made them even more appealing to travelers who would accept whatever comfort they could find. The first recorded disappearance occurred on September 23, 1852. The Morrison family, traveling alone after their wagon train dispersed, found themselves stranded when their axle broke just 2 miles from the chapel. Ezekiel appeared within hours, offering sanctuary and help with repairs. The Morrison family, in their exhaustion and hope, accepted. Little did they know this would be the beginning of their tragic end. For 3 days, everything seemed normal. Sister Constance tended to Elizabeth, Ezekiel helped James with wagon repairs, and Father Morrison provided comfort. The children played, and Elizabeth's father Samuel rested in the cabin. On the 4th day, things took a dark turn. Samuel fell ill, complaining of stomach cramps and nausea. Sister Constance attributed it to trail sickness and began administering her blessed remedies, which she prepared from herbs and other ingredients kept in the chapel's basement. But soon Samuel's condition worsened. His skin turned gray, he had labored breathing, and experienced vomiting and diarrhea. James suggested seeking help, but Father Morrison urged patience, claiming it was a sickness that must run its course. By the 6th day, young Tommy and Mary began showing similar symptoms. As Sister Constance tirelessly worked to care for them, Elizabeth and James, still healthy but exhausted, saw her as a saint sent by God. The truth was far darker. Her remedies were laced with arsenic, which the Graysons had learned to acquire from local mines. The poison mimicked common trail diseases, making the murders nearly undetectable. Samuel died on the 7th day, Tommy on the 9th, and Mary on the 11th. Despite the rapid deaths, the Graysons performed Christian rituals, and the family never questioned it, having already witnessed much death along the trail. By the 12th day, James began showing symptoms. Elizabeth, terrified, begged Sister Constance to save him. Her chilling response, "Some illnesses are God's way of calling his children home." James died on the 14th day, just hours before Elizabeth gave birth to a son who would die shortly after being baptized by Father Morrison. 3 days later, Elizabeth succumbed to the same illness. In less than 3 weeks, the entire Morrison family was wiped out. To anyone who might have inquired, the Graysons provided a reasonable explanation. The family had arrived sick, contracted a virulent disease, and died, despite the best efforts of Christian caregivers. Their possessions, the Graysons claimed, were consecrated to the Lord's work. But this was just the beginning. The Graysons had learned that murder executed with religious justification could be extraordinarily profitable. Their first family annihilation provided valuable lessons that would guide their operations for the next 36 years. They realized that isolated families were easier targets than those traveling in groups. The gradual onset of arsenic poisoning mimicked common trail ailments, and their religious authority made them highly credible to grieving families. Most importantly, the Oregon Trail offered a steady stream of victims' families who wouldn't be missed for months, if ever. The success of the Morrison murders taught the Graysons how to refine their methods. Ezekiel began scouting the trail, identifying wealthy, vulnerable families. Sister Constance experimented with different arsenic doses and delivery methods, while Father Morrison perfected his psychological manipulation, tailoring his approach to each family's denomination. The Graysons had turned murder into a carefully calculated business, one that would terrorize the Oregon Trail for decades. By 1853, the Graysons had refined their methodical approach to mass murder, evolving into a professional criminal enterprise. They began modifying the chapel, expanding the basement to store victims' possessions, prepare arsenic solutions, and create a temporary morgue for bodies. Behind the chapel, they dug unmarked graves ready to hold the remains of hundreds of victims. The winter of 1852 to 1853 provided them valuable time to plan. They sorted through the Morrison family's belongings, selling or hiding valuable items, and establishing connections with black market dealers in Oregon settlements. Ezekiel proved especially skilled in selling goods, using his honest appearance and straightforward manner to convince buyers that the items came from families who had returned east or died of natural causes. By spring 1853, the Graysons had fully transitioned from amateurs to professional predators, perfecting their victim selection, murder techniques, and disposal methods. Their public image was carefully crafted to keep them above suspicion. In May 1853, the Graysons encountered the Hoffman family ideal targets due to their wealth and vulnerability. The Hoffmans, German immigrants traveling with valuable possessions, including tools, textiles, and gold, had a limited command of English, making them dependent on the Graysons for communication. When their wagon broke down near the chapel, the Graysons saw another opportunity. Instead of waiting for illness to strike, Sister Constance began administering small doses of arsenic, disguised as preventive medicine. She convinced the family that her blessed protection would keep them healthy. The Hoffmans, grateful for the Graysons' help, had no idea of the impending danger. The murder took nearly a month, giving the Graysons time to inventory the Hoffmans' possessions and plan how to dispose of their valuable tools and trade goods. By the end of 1853, the Graysons had killed 3 families totaling 16 people and began treating their operation as a business. They kept meticulous records detailing every murder, the possessions taken, the methods used, and the profits earned. These records, found decades later in the chapel's hidden compartments, offered investigators a chilling glimpse into the cold, calculated nature of the Grayson family's crimes. The entries were written in Father Morrison's precise handwriting, often listing victims by name, their belongings, and the estimated profits from selling stolen goods. The Graysons also made detailed notes on their methods, learning from their mistakes. For example, one entry read, "Morrison family, 5 souls departed September-October 1852. Possessions included 2 gold coins, furniture-quality tools. Bodies interred in Grove Section C. Estimated profit, $400. Method, arsenic via medicinal tea. Duration, 17 days. Lessons learned, reduced dose frequency to extend timeline and reduce suspicion. As word spread along the trail about the Graysons' charity, more families sought their help, unknowingly walking into a trap. By summer 1854, the Graysons had perfected their approach to mass murder, treating it as a business operation. Their next victims would be the Weatherbe family, marking another milestone in their horrifying enterprise. The Weatherbe family's case was significant, not only because of their wealth, but also due to their intelligence and natural caution. Charles Weatherbe, a former Confederate officer, was trained to notice details and assess threats, while his wife Margaret, educated and aware of trail dangers, was naturally suspicious of strangers. They traveled with their twin daughters Sarah and Susan, and Margaret's younger brother David, a skilled blacksmith. When their wagon broke down near the Sacred Heart Chapel, Charles initially resisted the Graysons' offer of help. Having heard stories about travelers who disappeared after accepting help, he was uneasy about the Graysons' timing and the isolation of the location. Despite his resistance, Father Morrison expertly adapted his approach. He casually mentioned the sickness in the area, suggesting the family might want to stay until they were certain none of them had been exposed. Charles, hesitant but concerned about his family's health, reluctantly agreed to stay. When David developed a mild fever the next day, Sister Constance claimed it was a sign of the regional sickness, and the family's resistance began to crumble. Margaret suggested they accept the Graysons' offer to shelter them just until David recovered. Charles agreed, but his military instincts remained alert, making him more difficult to manipulate than previous victims. The Graysons responded to Charles's suspicion with careful crafted stories. They showed him the chapel's cemetery, pointing out graves of travelers they claimed had arrived already dying and were buried with proper Christian rites. They even provided forged testimonial letters from families who had recovered after receiving the Graysons' care. Father Morrison subtly acknowledged Charles's military background, making him feel respected, and emphasized how unlikely it was that they would target a trained soldier like him. By demonstrating apparent honesty, he lowered Charles's defenses. The Weatherbe family's murder took nearly 6 weeks, the longest timeline the Graysons had attempted. Sister Constance began administering small doses of arsenic, disguised as healing water, so gradually that the symptoms appeared to be natural illness. David, the youngest and weakest, died first. His death seemed to confirm Sister Constance's warnings about the sickness, making the family even more trusting of her care. Margaret followed, and as she grew weaker, Charles began to notice patterns that disturbed him. His daughters remained healthy, but the others continued to fall ill, and the Graysons were always present during the worst moments. Charles's suspicions intensified when he caught Ezekiel examining the contents of their wagon late one night. When confronted, Ezekiel claimed he was checking the wagon to ensure it hadn't been tampered with by animals. Though plausible, Charles felt something was wrong. He told his dying wife, Margaret, "I think we need to leave this place. Something isn't right here." But Margaret was too weak to travel, and moving her would likely kill her. Charles felt trapped between his suspicions and his love for his family, unable to abandon his wife, but also unable to shake the feeling that staying would mean their doom. The resolution came when Charles discovered a hidden compartment in the chapel's basement, containing possessions that clearly belonged to other travelers' items, too personal and valuable to have been willingly abandoned. Among these items, he found a child's doll, a pocket watch engraved with an unfamiliar name, and, most damning of all, a letter addressed to someone in Oregon City. This discovery confirmed his worst fears. The Graysons had been systematically murdering travelers and stealing their possessions. recent letter which had obviously never been sent. The letter, written in a woman's handwriting, described arriving safely at the chapel and thanking God for the kindness of the Christian family who was caring for her sick children. Charles immediately realized he had found evidence of previous murders. The realization that his family was being systematically poisoned by the very people who claimed to be saving them came too late. Margaret died that night, and by morning Charles began feeling the familiar symptoms that had preceded each family member's death. What Charles didn't know was that the Graysons had been watching him carefully. They noticed his growing suspicions and decided to accelerate his poisoning before he could act. Father Morrison had slipped a massive dose of arsenic into Charles's evening meal, ensuring that the former soldier would be too weak to pose a threat. As Charles lay dying with his twin daughters at his bedside, he made a desperate attempt to warn them about the Graysons' true nature, but his words were dismissed as the ramblings of a fevered mind. The girls continued to trust the people who were slowly murdering them. The Weatherbe case taught the Graysons several important lessons: that intelligent, suspicious victims required more sophisticated manipulation techniques, that extending the murder timeline, though riskier, made their crimes more believable and profitable, and that they needed better methods for detecting and managing victims who became suspicious of their activities. Most importantly, the case demonstrated that even intelligent, trained people could be deceived and murdered if the right psychological techniques were applied with patience and skill. This realization gave the Graysons the confidence to target increasingly wealthy and prominent families, knowing their methods could overcome even the most careful and suspicious travelers. The discovery of evidence from previous murders in the chapel basement led the Graysons to improve their evidence disposal procedures. They began burning personal items that could identify victims, melting down jewelry and precious metals to eliminate identifying marks, and creating more sophisticated hiding places for possessions they intended to keep or sell later. By the end of 1854, the Graysons had murdered 23 people in 7 families, transforming their operation into a sophisticated criminal enterprise, generating substantial profits while maintaining complete secrecy. They had also begun to see themselves not as criminals, but as instruments of divine will, rewarded for their service by the prosperity that came from their victims' possessions. The year 1855 marked a crucial turning point when the Graysons faced their first major challenge: the survival of an intended victim who had witnessed enough to expose their entire operation. The incident began routinely with the arrival of the Patterson family from Ohio, but it would end with the Graysons facing the terrifying possibility of discovery. Thomas Patterson, a successful merchant, had liquidated his Ohio business to pursue opportunities in Oregon's growing economy. He traveled with his wife Emily, their 4 children, and Emily's sister Catherine, who was the family's teacher and caregiver. The Patterson family was particularly attractive to the Graysons because of their wealth and respectability. Thomas had converted his business assets into easily transportable gold and banknotes. Their obvious wealth made them tempting targets, but their disappearance would likely be noticed by business associates in both Ohio and Oregon. When their wagon train dispersed near the Blue Mountains, they were traveling alone when they encountered Ezekiel about 5 miles from the Sacred Heart Chapel. Though their wagon had not broken down and none of the family members were obviously ill, Ezekiel created an opportunity. "Good afternoon, brother," Ezekiel called as he approached the Patterson wagon. "I couldn't help but notice your fine team of oxen. That's quality livestock right there. You wouldn't happen to be interested in trading for some fresh supplies? We keep a good stock at the chapel just ahead." Thomas Patterson, a shrewd businessman, was cautious. He appreciated the offer but declined, stating they were well supplied for the rest of their journey. However, Ezekiel, prepared for this response, added, "Of course, but I wonder if I might mention something that could save your family considerable trouble. Sister Constance, that's our medical woman, she's been treating several cases of mountain fever in recent weeks. It's a nasty business that takes hold gradually And by the time folks realize they're sick, they're too weak to travel safely. The mention of disease had its intended effect. Emily immediately began to worry about her children's health. "Mountain fever?" she asked. "We haven't heard anything about disease in the area." Ezekiel, with practiced concern, responded, "Well, ma'am, it's not something folks like to talk about. Bad for business, if you know what I mean. But Sister Constance has remedies that can prevent it if administered before the symptoms appear. Might be worth your while to stop by the chapel just to have your family examined." Thomas remained skeptical, but Emily, now worried about her children, suggested perhaps we should at least speak with this medical woman. If there's disease in the area, shouldn't we take precautions? Reluctantly, Thomas agreed, thinking they would simply gather information about the disease and continue their journey. Little did he know this decision would lead to the most harrowing experience of their lives. The Graysons received the Patterson family with their usual combination of Christian warmth and subtle manipulation. Father Morrison impressed Thomas with his knowledge of business and apparent familiarity with Oregon's commercial conditions. Sister Constance charmed Emily with her gentle manner while Ezekiel entertained the children. Within hours, the family agreed to spend the night at the chapel to allow Sister Constance to examine them for signs of mountain fever. The examination revealed that several family members showed early symptoms that required immediate treatment with Sister Constance's preventive remedies. Catherine, Emily's unmarried sister, was the first to receive treatment as she had devoted her life to caring for her family, most of the evidence of their crimes with them. The soldiers also discovered the remains of the families who had been murdered before the Pattersons, their bodies hastily buried in shallow graves behind the chapel. The military patrol gathered all the available evidence, including the vial of poison that Catherine had kept and the items from the wagon that had been handled by Ezekiel. The investigation soon uncovered the scale of the Graysons' criminal operations, and it was clear that their murders had been carefully orchestrated for years. The Graysons had managed to elude capture for so long by blending their predatory behavior with a facade of Christian charity and devotion. Their victims had trusted them, and by the time they realized the true danger, it was often too late. The discovery of the Graysons' crimes rocked the local community, with many settlers and travelers who had relied on the chapel now questioning everything they had once believed about the family. But for the Patterson family, their escape had come just in time. Catherine, Emily, and Timothy were eventually taken to a nearby settlement where they received medical care, though Emily's health was already severely compromised from the poisoning. Catherine's bravery in the face of such overwhelming danger not only saved her family but also exposed the Graysons for the ruthless murderers they were. Their reign of terror ended with their flight, but the damage had already been done. The Graysons, with their meticulously crafted operation, had murdered many, and their legacy would forever haunt the Oregon Trail. Catherine and her surviving family members would live with the memories of those dark days, knowing that they had narrowly escaped the fate that had befallen so many others, evolved over time. The Graysons, now operating under the false identities of the Morrison family, had refined their approach to murdering and robbing travelers. They had become even more sophisticated in their psychological manipulation, using a mix of religious charity and calculated medical assistance to lure victims into their grasp. Father Benedict, as Morrison was now known, welcomed the Henderson family with open arms, offering them the usual promises of help and sanctuary. Sister Mary Constance quickly began examining the family members, particularly the children, for signs of illness. She was careful to play on the mother's concerns, suggesting that preventive treatments could help ward off the potential dangers of the harsh frontier. Brother Thomas Ezekiel was just as meticulous, offering to assist with the family's livestock, helping them repair their wagon, and making sure to check the family's most valuable possessions under the guise of offering protection. The agents, watching from the hills, noted the careful coordination between the three Morrisons and how the patterns mirrored exactly what Catherine Patterson had described Father Benedict, sizing up the wealth and vulnerability of the Hendersons' sister Mary offering medical care and brother Thomas keeping a close eye on their possessions. But this time the Graysons had gone a step further. They had integrated a more refined system for managing victims and ensuring their operations ran more smoothly. The family had not only perfected their methods of murder, but had also begun setting up a network of trusted associates in nearby settlements who would receive and launder their stolen goods. They had become a well-oiled machine. As the days passed, the Henderson family grew increasingly reliant on the Graysons. The promise of health and safety amidst the dangers of the trail became harder to resist. However, the surveillance team was patient and watched carefully, knowing that any premature action might alert the Graysons and allow them to disappear once again. They were waiting for the right moment to act. It came on the fifth night. As the Graysons moved forward with their plan to poison the Hendersons, the agents struck. A carefully coordinated raid on the mission station ensued, with agents storming the building at the exact moment that Father Benedict and his assistants were in the midst of their deadly rituals. The surprise attack caught the Graysons off guard, and before they could flee, they were arrested. The investigators quickly seized documents, records, and stolen goods that confirmed the Graysons' murderous enterprise. As they were taken into custody, Father Benedict Morai, Sister Mary Constance, and Brother Thomas Ezekiel showed no signs of remorse. Their demeanor was eerily calm, as if they believed they were destined to continue their work, having justified their actions as a divine mission. But the evidence was overwhelming. Their meticulous records detailed years of murder, theft, and deceit, with over 150 victims to their names. The Graysons' reign of terror came to an end that spring, 2 years after their escape from the Sacred Heart Chapel. The trial that followed was one of the most infamous in frontier history, drawing attention across the nation. The surviving family members, especially Catherine Patterson, who had provided crucial testimony, were hailed as heroes. Catherine's efforts led to the conviction of the Graysons, but the psychological toll on the survivors remained. Emily Patterson, weakened by poisoning, died within a year, and Timothy carried the scars of his ordeal for the rest of his life. Catherine, driven by her need for justice, became an advocate for other victims of the Graysons and tirelessly worked to ensure their story was told. The Graysons' fall marked the end of one of the most chilling criminal operations in American history. They had exploited the vulnerability of travelers seeking refuge and turned kindness into a deadly weapon. Their ability to manipulate religious faith, combined with their ruthless efficiency and financial resources, allowed them to operate with impunity for years. But in the end, their brutal enterprise was exposed, bringing an end to their reign of terror and ensuring that their names would forever be associated with one of the darkest chapters in the history of the American frontier, and ensured that only the strong survived to build a better future. What we did was for the greater good, to clear the path for those truly deserving of life. His words revealed the full extent of his delusion as he justified the murders as a form of divine purification, a twisted form of mercy in his eyes. The chilling response confirmed what investigators feared. The Graysons had not only operated for years with complete detachment from morality, but they had developed a perverse sense of entitlement to their victims' lives and belongings. They believed that their actions were sanctioned by God, transforming their serial murders into a cold business. Each victim was merely a stepping stone, an obstacle to be eliminated for the greater good in their warped perception. The interrogation of the Grayson family continued, with Father Morai now fully unmasked, showcasing the terrifying ease with which he had manipulated entire communities. His ability to convincingly assume the guise of a devout preacher, helping the sick and offering solace, made his actions even more horrifying. His rejection of guilt, combined with Sister Constance's chilling rationalization, only solidified the extent of their depravity. As the investigation unfolded, the full scale of their operation came to light. The Graysons' murder spree stretched over a decade and across multiple states, with the family's grip on the trail communities growing tighter with each year. The detailed records discovered in their mission office and hidden compartments revealed their evolution from opportunistic killers to calculating business-like murderers. They had refined their methods, expanded their operation, and planned to continue growing their criminal empire undeterred by the deaths they caused. The Henderson family, who had narrowly escaped the Graysons' grasp, became crucial in securing the Graysons' conviction. James Henderson's testimony about the manipulative and persuasive techniques used by the Graysons was instrumental. His account of how they had been slowly poisoned under the guise of medical care provided the investigators with the missing pieces needed to prove that the Graysons' methods were both systematic and deliberate. However, despite the overwhelming evidence, the psychological toll on the survivors was immense. The trauma caused by the Graysons' manipulations left deep scars on the Hendersons. James Henderson, in particular, struggled with the betrayal and the emotional fallout of nearly losing his family to what he had once believed to be a Christian family offering help. His words echoed the disbelief many survivors felt. "If someone had told me they were murderers, I would have called them crazy." As authorities pieced together the Graysons' entire criminal history, their horrifying legacy was laid bare. The capture of the Graysons marked a critical moment in history. Their meticulous operations, fueled by greed and a distorted sense of divine purpose, had been exposed. Despite their capture, the damage they had inflicted on the families they murdered was irreversible. The psychological toll on those who had narrowly escaped was just as profound. The Graysons' ability to deceive and manipulate, hiding behind a mask of Christian charity, forever altered the way travelers viewed those who offered help on the trail. Ultimately, the Graysons were held accountable for their crimes. Father Morrison, Sister Constance, and Brother Ezekiel were tried and convicted, though their trials couldn't undo the damage they had caused. They would be remembered not just as murderers, but as masterminds of one of the most insidious criminal enterprises in American history. A family that had preyed on the most vulnerable, turning their faith and desperation into weapons of mass murder. Their fall served as a grim reminder of the darkness that can lie beneath the surface of even the most benevolent facades, how people viewed safety and trust along the Oregon Trail and throughout the Western Territories. The Graysons' reign of terror had shattered the illusion of safety that many had placed in the hands of religious figures and community helpers. Travelers, now wary and more distrustful, began to question every offer of assistance from strangers, and authorities took a much harder stance on any claims of medical or spiritual service in remote areas. The case also highlighted the immense vulnerability of westward migrants' families struggling with illness, exhaustion, and the harsh realities of the frontier. The Graysons had preyed upon this vulnerability, exploiting the desperate need for help. Their ability to manipulate their victims into believing they were acting out of Christian charity while systematically murdering them for profit shocked the nation. The public's perception of frontier life was forever changed. What had once been seen as a journey toward freedom and prosperity now seemed fraught with hidden dangers. Father Morrison's conviction marked the end of his twisted crusade, but it did little to undo the deep psychological scars left by the Graysons' crimes. For the survivors, Catherine Patterson, the Henderson family, and the others whose lives had been destroyed by the Graysons, there would be no true closure. Many of them spent the rest of their lives grappling with the trauma of their experiences, haunted by the memories of lost loved ones and the horrifying realization that those they had trusted were capable of such monstrous acts. The trial of the Grayson family became a turning point in American legal and cultural history. It led to reforms in how crimes were investigated in frontier territories, particularly those involving disappearances and suspicious deaths. More resources were allocated to investigating missing persons, and new laws were enacted to better protect travelers on the frontier. Furthermore, the case pushed authorities to be more skeptical of religious and charitable figures operating in isolated areas, leading to the creation of more stringent regulations around such organizations. Despite the Graysons' downfall, the legacy of their crimes left a permanent scar on the western frontier. The fear and distrust sown by their actions lingered for years, especially among those who had heard the stories of the murderers who had posed as saviors. For some, the shadow of the Graysons' cruelty served as a reminder of the brutal realities lurking beneath the surface of frontier life, where even the most seemingly benevolent figures could harbor terrifying secrets. The Grayson family, once seen as devoted Christian missionaries, were now remembered in history as symbols of the darkest depths of human depravity. Their ability to exploit faith, fear, and the fragility of frontier life left a haunting imprint on the American consciousness, ensuring that their story would never be forgotten and serving as a grim cautionary tale for generations to come. This chilling tale of the Grayson family's crimes reveals the darker hidden side of America's frontier past. It forces us to rethink the idealized narrative of westward expansion, where brave pioneers are often portrayed as overcoming hardship and adversity. In reality, the frontier was not only shaped by courage and determination, but also by predatory figures like the Graysons, who exploited the very vulnerabilities that made settlers so trusting and desperate for help. The Graysons' ability to exploit Christian charity for their own malevolent purposes highlights the complexity of human nature. The family wasn't made up of obvious villains. They were intelligent, articulate people who successfully disguised their monstrous actions behind the facade of faith and good deeds. Their crimes revealed a disturbing truth that evil can be methodical, organized, and sustained over time, even by those who present themselves as trustworthy figures within a community. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Graysons' actions was their belief in the righteousness of their cause. They convinced themselves that they were doing a service by eliminating the weak and diseased, redistributing their victims' wealth to those they deemed deserving. This twisted sense of self-righteousness, combined with their lack of remorse, showcased a profound moral corruption that went beyond simple greed or desperation. It was an arrogance fueled by delusion, a dangerous form of thinking that justified the exploitation of human lives. The psychological impact of their crimes continued to ripple through the Western territories long after the Graysons were brought to justice. The abandonment of the Sacred Heart Chapel and the mission of Divine Mercy, along with the stories that circulated about the false missionaries, served as constant reminders of the dangers that lurked on the frontier. Religious communities once trusted by migrants in need had to confront the fact that their charity could be twisted and used for evil purposes. As a result, many travelers became more cautious, and the suspicion of strangers became ingrained in the culture of westward migration. But amidst the darkness, there were survivors like Patterson, whose testimony not only exposed the Graysons' crimes, but also saved countless future lives. Catherine's courage to speak out even after everything she had endured stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her efforts helped transform the way authorities handled cases of missing persons and suspicious deaths, creating a more systematic approach to investigating crimes that involved vulnerable travelers. The legacy of the Grayson family reminds us that the American frontier was not just a place of hope and opportunity, but also a realm where exploitation could thrive if left unchecked. Their systematic murder of over 800 people serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of blind trust and the profound impact of misplaced faith in the wrong hands. It's a chilling tale, one that continues to haunt the collective memory of the American West. So what do you think of this disturbing story from America's past? Has it changed your perspective on the romanticized history of westward expansion? The Grayson family's ability to exploit Christian charity to mask their criminal activity highlights just how complex and dark human nature can be. If this story has given you chills and made you reconsider the hidden dangers of the frontier, share it with others who are fascinated by dark historical mysteries. Don't forget to hit that like button to support content that brings these forgotten horrors to light, and subscribe for more disturbing truths about America's past. Next time you hear stories about the brave pioneers of the West, remember that they weren't just fighting the elements. They were fighting predators like the Graysons who turned murder into a family business while hiding behind a mask of religious devotion. Thank you everyone for watching the video. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel to watch the next interesting videos.